I never thought a single night could change the way I saw someone I had known my entire life. My best friend had always been the guy who laughed at my bad jokes, stood by me in every rough patch, and swore up and down that love between men was not his thing. He said it often, almost like he needed to remind himself more than me. But that night, something happened that broke every wall he had built. Something so raw, so unexpected, that it left me questioning if I ever truly knew him at all. This story isn't just about friendship crossing lines, or about desire breaking silence. It's about the way one single choice can flip a lifetime of certainty upside down. It's about what it means to really see someone, and to finally admit feelings that had been buried for too long. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, because this story will pull you in, and trust me, you'll want to know how it ends. The night started like so many others, two best friends hanging out, trying to escape the noise of the world. Ryan had just gone through a breakup with a girl he'd been dating for almost a year, and though he kept pretending he was fine, I could see through him. Always could. His smile had that tired edge, his laugh wasn't reaching his eyes, and the way he kept sipping on his beer made me think he was trying to swallow down feelings he wouldn't dare speak out loud. We were at my apartment, sprawled on the worn couch that had seen countless late-night talks, video game marathons, and even a few drunken arguments. The TV was on but muted, throwing flickering light across the room, while an old playlist hummed softly through the speakers. It felt comfortable, familiar, yet beneath that comfort, I felt something shifting, like a current pulling beneath calm waters. Ryan leaned back, resting the bottle on his knee, and let out a long sigh. "Man, I don't get it," he said. His voice cracked slightly, and it wasn't from the alcohol. "I gave her everything. I tried to be the guy she wanted me to be. And still, it wasn't enough." I turned my head toward him, watching the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes avoided mine. "Maybe that's the problem," I said softly. "Maybe you shouldn't have to twist yourself into someone else just to be loved." He finally looked at me, his eyes glassy but sharp in that moment. "Easy for you to say. You always seem so sure of yourself. You never had to," he trailed off, swallowing hard. "You never had to pretend." That word, pretend, hung heavy between us. I shifted uncomfortably, not because of what he said, but because I could feel there was something deeper, something he wasn't saying outright. "Ryan," I asked carefully, "pretend what?" His lips tightened into a thin line, and for a moment I thought he was going to shrug it off, maybe laugh, maybe change the subject. Instead, he took another long pull from his drink and muttered, almost to himself, that I don't feel things I shouldn't. My chest tightened. There it was, just a shadow of confession, but it hit me like a lightning strike. "Things you shouldn't?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm even as my pulse raced. He chuckled, but it wasn't the light-hearted sound I'd heard all my life. It was bitter, almost broken. "Look, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not gay, all right?" His words were quick, defensive, like a shield. "I'm just saying, sometimes it's hard. Being close to people. Feeling things you know you can't act on." I didn't push him. Instead, I just nodded slowly, though my mind was spinning. For years, I'd hidden my own feelings for Ryan, convinced myself they were nothing more than friendship, or if they weren't, that I'd never say it out loud. He was my best friend. The guy I'd grown up with. The one who had always said, "I'm not like that." So I stayed quiet, burying every longing glance, every moment where I wished his hand would linger just a little longer on my shoulder, every dream where I wondered what it would be like if he saw me the way I saw him. Now, sitting here, hearing him say those words, it cracked something open. The room felt smaller. The air thicker. He leaned forward, setting his empty bottle on the coffee table, and ran a hand through his hair. His shirt rode up slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his toned stomach, a sight that shouldn't have made my throat go dry after all these years, but it did. "Do you ever feel like you're just living someone else's life?" Ryan asked suddenly, his voice low, almost fragile. "All the time," I admitted. My honesty seemed to surprise him, because he looked up at me sharply. He asked. "You always seem like you know who you are. Like you've got it all figured out." I laughed, shaking my head. "Trust me, I don't. I just hide it better, maybe. There are parts of me I've never had the courage to show anyone. Our eyes met then, really met, and it was like the air between us shifted again. His gaze lingered, softer this time, searching. My heartbeat was so loud I was sure he could hear it. He leaned back slowly, and for a long moment neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was charged, alive with everything we weren't saying. I could feel the edge we were teetering on, and I didn't know if I was ready to fall. Ryan broke the silence first. You know what's crazy? His lips curled into a faint, almost sad smile. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if things were different. If I was different. I swallowed hard, my voice barely steady when I asked, different how? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back into the couch, closing his eyes like the weight of the question was too heavy. Forget it, he said finally. I'm just drunk and talking nonsense. But I didn't believe that. Not for a second. Because in that look, in that pause, I saw something I'd never let myself hope for before. And as I sat there, staring at him, my heart pounding with everything unsaid, I realized something. This night wasn't like the others. This night had cracked the foundation of everything we thought we knew. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing between us would ever be the same. And then Ryan opened his eyes, turned his head toward me, and whispered, "What if I told you there's something I've wanted to try, but I don't know if I can?" The world seemed to stop spinning in that instant, and I knew the cliff we were standing on had just gotten sharper. Ryan's words echoed in the dimly lit room. What if I told you there's something I've wanted to try, but I don't know if I can? My heart skipped, then started pounding in my chest like it was trying to break free. I leaned forward slightly, trying to read his face, but his eyes were fixed on the floor, as though he'd just admitted something he regretted. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. A dozen questions swirled in my head, but I didn't want to scare him, didn't want to push too hard and have him retreat into silence. What do you mean? I asked carefully, my voice calm, though my insides were trembling. Ryan exhaled, a shaky breath that told me he was wrestling with himself. I've been thinking a lot. Since the breakup. Since before that, really. And I keep coming back to this thought I can't shake. But every time I get close to admitting it, I pull back. The vulnerability in his tone hit me hard. This was Ryan, the guy who never let himself look weak, who carried himself with a kind of unshakable bravado even when everything inside him was cracking. And now, here he was, breaking the walls down, at least a little. You can tell me, I said softly. You know you can tell me anything. He looked up then, his eyes catching mine, searching them like he was trying to see if it was safe. The tension between us was thick, but it wasn't the bad kind. It was the kind that hummed with possibility, like something waiting to ignite. I don't know what it means, he admitted. But sometimes, when I'm around you, I feel things I don't with anyone else. And it scares the hell out of me. I froze. His words washed over me like a tidal wave, and for a split second, I wondered if I'd imagined them. But the look on his face, the nervous twist of his lips, the way his hand clenched on the couch cushion, told me he was dead serious. Ryan, my throat was tight. You don't have to be scared. Not with me. He gave a hollow laugh, shaking his head. That's the thing, though. I'm scared. Because if I admit it, if I let myself go there, then everything changes. And I don't know if we can come back from that. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, in my ears, in every part of me. He was right. Everything would change. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe it was what we'd both been running from for too long. I shifted closer, closing the small gap between us. Ryan, I said gently, sometimes the scariest thing is exactly what we need. He looked at me like he wanted to believe that, but he was still caught in the tug-of-war inside himself. His jaw tightened, his chest rose and fell, and then, suddenly, he reached for the bottle on the table, taking another sip like it might drown the storm in his head. I let the silence stretch, knowing he needed space to wrestle with it. But I couldn't stop my own thoughts from racing. I dreamed of this moment in countless variations, though never like this, never so raw, so unplanned. I'd always thought if he ever hinted at it, I'd know exactly what to say. But now that it was happening, I felt both terrified and alive in a way I couldn't explain. Finally, he set the bottle down with a soft clink and leaned back, rubbing his hands over his face. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I shouldn't have said anything. Forget I said that." The words were a dagger. "Don't apologize," I said firmly, leaning closer so he couldn't retreat into the shadows of his fear. "You trusted me with what you're feeling. That means something. It means more than you think." He dropped his hands, staring at me with an expression that was equal parts confusion and hope. "So what? You're just okay with it? With me saying that?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm okay with it. I'm more than okay with it." The admission slipped out before I could stop myself, but I didn't want to stop. His eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought he was going to ask me what I meant. Instead, he whispered, almost like he was afraid of the answer, "Why?" I hesitated only a second before I let the truth out. Because I felt the same way for a long time. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's expression shifted, shock, disbelief, something unnameable flashing in his eyes. His lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Finally he managed, You what?" I nodded slowly, my chest heavy with the weight of what I'd just confessed. "I felt it too. I just never thought you would. I thought if I ever told you I'd lose you." His gaze locked onto mine, and I could see his mind spinning, trying to process, trying to decide what to do with this revelation. He leaned forward slightly, his face inches from mine, his breath warm against my skin. My entire body tensed with anticipation. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking. "Because you always said you weren't like that," I answered honestly. "And I didn't want to push you away. I couldn't risk it." He closed his eyes for a second, like the weight of that truth was sinking in. When he opened them again, they burned with something I'd never seen in him before. "I don't know what this makes me," he whispered, "but I know I don't want to run from it anymore." The electricity between us sparked, hotter, more undeniable. I could feel every second stretching out, every breath heavy with what might happen next. My heart screamed at me to bridge the last inch between us, to stop holding back. But just as I started to lean in, Ryan pulled back suddenly, his face torn with conflict. "Wait," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know if I can do this. Not yet." The cliff we were balancing on crumbled a little, leaving us both dangling over the edge. And I knew, as much as I wanted him, this was only the beginning of the storm we were about to walk into. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of the night before pressing down on me like an invisible blanket. I replayed every word, every look, every pause in Ryan's voice. He had come so close to admitting what we both felt, and then just as quickly, he had pulled back, retreating into his fortress of doubt. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, torn between relief that he had finally spoken his truth and frustration that he wasn't ready to step over the line we'd been dancing around for years. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and when I saw his name on the screen, my chest tightened. "Hey," I answered, my voice still groggy. "Morning," Ryan said quietly. He didn't sound like himself. His usual confidence, his playful tone, it was gone. "Can we hang out later? I think we should talk." I sat up, my pulse quickening. "Yeah, of course. When?" "Come by my place around noon," he replied. Then there was a pause, like he wanted to add something but couldn't. "See you then." The line went dead, leaving me with 1,000 thoughts swirling in my head. When I pulled up to Ryan's apartment, I found him sitting on the steps outside, wearing a hoodie even though the sun was warm. He was hunched over, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. As soon as he saw me, he stood, forcing a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Hey," I echoed, searching his face for answers. "You okay?" He let out a humorless laugh. "Not really." We went inside, and he grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, handing me one even though it was barely noon. That was his way, beer meant he needed courage. I sat on the couch, and he leaned against the counter, running his hand through his messy hair. "I didn't sleep last night," he admitted. "I kept thinking about what I said. What you said." I took a sip, my throat dry. "Me too," He looked at me then, eyes raw with emotion. I don't know how to do this. My whole life I've been told what's right, what's wrong, who I'm supposed to be. And now, it feels like none of that makes sense anymore. My chest ached hearing him say that. I wanted to tell him he didn't need to have all the answers, that it was okay to just feel, but I knew he wasn't ready for comfort. He needed honesty. You don't have to label it, Ryan, I said gently. You just have to decide if what you feel is real enough to fight for. He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. That's the thing. It is real. Too real. But the second I let myself imagine it, I see everything falling apart. My family, my friends, they'd never understand. I stood and crossed the room, closing the distance between us. Then let them not understand. This isn't about them. It's about you. It's about us. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I'd ever said to him. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my chest tighten. For a moment, it felt like he was going to break down all the walls and finally let me in. But then, his phone rang. The sound shattered the fragile moment. He pulled it out of his pocket, and when he saw the name on the screen, his jaw tightened. "It's my mom," he muttered, answering quickly. I turned away, giving him space, but I could still hear every word. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said, his voice sharp. "No, I don't want to talk about it. Mom, please, not now." His tone grew strained. I said I don't want to talk about it. He ended the call abruptly and slammed the phone on the counter, his shoulders tense, his breathing uneven. "Ryan," I started, but he cut me off. "She keeps asking why I haven't been myself," he said bitterly. "Why I've been pulling away. And I can't even tell her the truth, because what would I say? Hey, Mom, I think I might be in love with my best friend." His laugh was hollow, broken. The words hit me like a punch, because there it was, said out loud, even if he didn't fully realize it. I stepped closer, my hand instinctively reaching for his arm. "Do you hear yourself? You're saying it. You're admitting it whether you mean to or not." His eyes flicked to mine, burning with fear and longing all at once. "And what if I ruin everything? What if I lose you?" "You won't," I said firmly, my hand still on his arm. "You couldn't lose me if you tried." The tension between us snapped then, and before either of us could stop it, he closed the distance, pressing his forehead against mine. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. His breath was shaky, his hands trembling at his sides, but he didn't pull away. "Tell me this isn't a mistake," he whispered. "It's not," I replied without hesitation. And then, in a moment that felt like the world had stopped spinning, his lips brushed mine. Tentative, uncertain, but real. The kiss was fleeting, gone almost as quickly as it came, but it was enough to send electricity coursing through me. When he pulled back, his expression was torn between awe and panic. "God," he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. "What the hell are we doing?" "We're finally being honest," I said, my voice low but steady. He looked at me, his chest rising and falling rapidly, as though trying to decide whether to run or to stay. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know if I can handle this." The cliffhanger hung heavy in the room, leaving me breathless, because I knew this was the moment that could either bring us together or tear us apart. The silence after Ryan's words lingered like a storm cloud, heavy and charged. I stood there in his apartment, my heart racing, every nerve alive with the memory of that kiss. For me, it had been a spark of clarity, proof that what I felt wasn't just in my head. For him, it was a step onto shaky ground, and he wasn't sure if it would hold. He walked to the window, his back to me, hands gripping the edge of the sill like he needed to steady himself. "You don't get it," he said, his voice low, ragged. "If this was just a phase, if this was just a thought, maybe I could ignore it. But it's you. It's us. And that terrifies me." I wanted to close the gap, to tell him that fear meant we were stepping into something real, something worth it. But before I could speak, there was a loud knock at his door. Ryan stiffened. "Who the hell?" He moved toward the door and opened it to reveal two of his friends, guys I'd known from around town. Derek and Matt, both loud, confident, the kind of men who always had something to prove. "Yo, man," Derek said, grinning as he clapped Ryan on the shoulder. We're heading out to grab some food and maybe catch the game. You in? Ryan glanced at me, then back at them. For a moment, I saw panic flash in his eyes, like he wasn't ready to face anyone else right now, least of all people who would never understand what had just happened between us. Now's not a good time, he muttered. Matt's eyes landed on me, narrowing slightly. Didn't know you had company. His tone was casual, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity, maybe even suspicion. Ryan forced a laugh. Yeah, just hanging out. Nothing big. He shifted awkwardly, blocking the doorway as if to shield me from their eyes. All right, Derek said slowly, clearly picking up on the tension. We'll catch you later, then. As soon as the door shut, Ryan exhaled hard and leaned against it. His hands trembled slightly. See? This is exactly what I mean. They'd never let me hear the end of it if they knew. I can't deal with that kind of pressure. I stepped closer. Ryan, you don't owe them, or anyone else, an explanation about what's happening between us. But I owe myself one, he shot back, his voice rising. I can't walk into this blindly. I need to know what it means. What it makes me. And I don't. His words stung, not because they weren't true, but because they showed just how deep his fear ran. I tried to stay calm. You're overthinking it. This doesn't have to define you in a way that scares you. It can just be simple. He shook his head. It's never going to be simple. The rest of the afternoon passed in fits and starts. One moment we'd talk, the next we'd fall into silence, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down on us. I wanted to believe that the kiss had been a breakthrough, but instead, it felt like we'd hit a wall. By evening, Ryan seemed restless, pacing his apartment, checking his phone, opening the fridge only to close it again. Finally, he grabbed his keys. I need some air, he said. Wanna come? We ended up at a small bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the music was loud enough to drown out awkward silences. Ryan ordered whiskey, neat, and downed half of it in one gulp. As the night wore on, I watched him grow looser, his guard slipping under the haze of alcohol. At one point, he leaned closer across the table, his voice softer. You ever wonder if we were meant to meet for this reason? He asked. Like, maybe we're not just friends. Maybe we're something else. My chest tightened. All the time. He smiled faintly, but it faded just as quickly. But what if we ruin it? What if trying to be more means losing everything we already have? I reached across the table, brushing my fingers against his hand. Or what if it means finding something even better? His eyes flickered with that familiar mix of longing and fear. But before he could answer, there was a commotion near the bar. A group of guys were getting rowdy, their voices loud, their energy reckless. One of them stumbled into our table, nearly knocking over Ryan's drink. Watch it, Ryan said sharply. The guy turned, eyes narrowing. Relax, man. It's a bar. But then he looked between us, his smirk twisting. Unless you two are on some kind of date? The words hung in the air like a slap. Ryan froze, his face flushing, his jaw tightening. I felt my stomach drop. It's not like that, Ryan said quickly, his voice hard. The guy laughed and walked away, but the damage was done. Ryan's hand pulled away from mine, and the distance between us felt like a canyon. We left the bar in silence, the night air biting against my skin. Once we got back to his truck, Ryan slammed the door shut and sat there gripping the steering wheel. This is what I was talking about, he said finally, his voice low and tense. People always have something to say. Boys. And I can't handle that. I turned toward him, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay steady. But what about me, Ryan? What about us? Are you really going to let some stranger's words decide what we mean to each other? He closed his eyes, his knuckles white on the wheel. I don't know, he whispered. And in that moment, I realized the external conflict we feared wasn't just outside. It was inside him, eating away at every chance we had to be real. As the engine roared to life and the truck pulled away from the bar, I stared out the window, my heart heavy with uncertainty. Because I knew this was the turning point, where Ryan would either find the courage to fight for us, or let fear tear us apart. The ride back from the bar felt endless. Streetlights flickered past in golden blurs, but neither of us spoke. Ryan's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his jaw clenched like he was holding back 1,000 words he wasn't ready to release. I sat in silence, watching him, wishing I could reach across that small gap between us and bridge it. But I knew he wasn't ready. When we finally pulled into his driveway, the night air was sharp, the silence heavier than before. Ryan shut off the engine but didn't move. He sat there staring straight ahead, his shoulders tense. I waited, hoping he'd say something, anything, to break the wall between us. "I can't keep doing this," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep pretending I'm fine when my whole life feels like it's splitting in two." I turned toward him, my heart hammering. "Then stop pretending. Let yourself feel what's real, Ryan. It's not wrong to want this. It's not wrong to want me." His head fell back against the seat. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, with a sigh, he opened the door and stepped out. I followed, the gravel crunching under my shoes as we walked into his house. Inside, Ryan poured another drink. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted the glass, and I could see the battle waging inside him. I didn't know how much more of this push and pull I could take, but I also knew I couldn't walk away, not when I'd already fallen so deeply. "You think it's that easy?" he asked suddenly, setting the glass down with a sharp clink. "You think I can just decide to want you, and everything else will disappear? That my friends won't notice? That my family won't care?" I stepped closer, feeling my chest tighten. "No, I don't think it'll be easy. But I think it'll be worth it." His eyes met mine, dark and conflicted. "And what if I'm not strong enough to face what comes with this?" I swallowed hard, my voice breaking with quiet honesty. "Then I'll be strong enough for both of us." For a moment, it felt like something shifted between us. His expression softened, his guard lowered. But just as quickly, he turned away, pacing the room like he was running from his own thoughts. That's when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and I saw Derek's name light up. He hesitated, then answered. "Yeah." His voice was tight. "No, I'm good." "Yeah, maybe tomorrow. We'll see." He hung up, tossing the phone onto the counter like it burned his hand. They know something's up. I can hear it in their voices. They'll keep pushing until I slip, and then what? I felt frustration boil inside me. "Ryan, do you hear yourself? You're letting their voices drown out your own. What about what you want?" The words hung in the air, heavier than before. He stared at me, his chest rising and falling as if he'd been holding his breath. Finally, he said, "I want you." The confession hit me like a wave. My throat tightened, my heart pounding. But before I could respond, he added, "And I'm terrified of it." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, though I tried to blink them away. But isn't that what makes it matter? That we're both scared but still here? He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. "You make it sound like a choice." "It is a choice," I said, stepping closer until there was barely space between us. "You can choose to let fear decide your life, or you can choose to take the risk and see where this goes. With me." His eyes searched mine, and for the first time, I saw something breaking through the fog of doubt, a spark of hope, fragile but real. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine, hesitant but deliberate. Before I could fully exhale, headlights swept across the window. A car pulled into the driveway, and Ryan's face drained of color. It was his parents. The knock on the door came seconds later, sharp and unexpected. Ryan froze, his hand slipping from mine. His mother's voice rang out, "Ryan? We were in the neighborhood. Can we come in?" Panic surged through him. "They can't know. Not now. Please, just don't say anything." I stood there, torn between the ache of his fear and the sting of being asked to hide. But the desperation in his eyes silenced me. I nodded. He opened the door, forcing a smile as his parents walked in. They chatted casually, his mother commenting on the cold night, his father asking about the truck parked outside. I sat in the corner, invisible, listening to Ryan slip into the role they expected of him. Steady, strong, the son who never strayed outside their idea of normal. But every glance he stole at me was a silent scream. He was fighting two worlds, and sooner or later, one of them would win. When his parents finally left, the silence in the house was deafening. Ryan sat heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I can't keep living like this," he whispered. I sat beside him, my hand resting gently on his back. "Then don't. You don't have to choose between hiding and losing yourself. You just have to choose what makes you feel alive." He lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed but clearer than I'd ever seen them. "And that's you." The words struck deep, but before the relief could fully take root, he leaned closer, his voice raw. "But if I choose you, I could lose everything else." My chest tightened. His confession was a victory, but also a dagger. We were on the edge of something beautiful or devastating. And I realized, as the night pressed around us, that the next step we took would decide whether our story was one of love found or love lost. Because Ryan had admitted the truth. But admitting it was only the beginning. The house was quiet after his parents left, but the weight of their presence lingered like a ghost. Ryan still sat slouched on the couch, his hands gripping his knees, as if anchoring himself to something solid while the ground beneath him threatened to give way. I stayed beside him, silent at first, because I knew words were fragile in moments like these. They could either heal or shatter. Finally, I broke the silence. "Ryan, you don't have to answer everything tonight. But you can't keep carrying this alone." He turned his head toward me, and I saw it, the exhaustion of a man who had lived 2 lives for far too long. His voice cracked when he said, "Do you know what it's like to feel like you're betraying everyone you've ever loved just by being yourself?" I swallowed, feeling the sting of his pain deep in my chest. "I know what it's like to be afraid of losing people because of who you are. But betrayal? The only betrayal is lying to yourself forever." Ryan leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms. "I've built my life around being the dependable son, the loyal friend, the guy everyone thinks they know. If I let this part of me out, if I let you in, it destroys that image. And what if they hate me for it?" I leaned closer, my hand brushing his arm. "And what if they love you anyway? What if the only thing standing in the way of your happiness is your fear?" He looked at me then, his eyes glassy, raw with vulnerability. For the first time, there was no mask, no sarcasm, no walls. Just Ryan, stripped down to his truth. "I've never told anyone," he whispered. "Not a single soul. You're the only one who knows." The weight of that confession crushed and uplifted me all at once. I wanted to hold him, to promise him it would all be okay, but I knew I couldn't guarantee that. What I could promise was that he wouldn't face it alone. "I'm honored you trust me," I said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever, if you'll let me stay." He let out a long, trembling breath, his hand finally reaching for mine. Our fingers intertwined, hesitant at first, then with certainty. "You make me want to believe that's possible." Silence fell again, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, alive, pulsing with something new between us. He shifted closer, and before I could fully process it, his lips brushed against mine. It wasn't desperate or rushed, it was tentative, almost reverent, as though he was afraid the moment would dissolve if he pressed too hard. I kissed him back, gently at first, then with the weight of everything I'd been holding inside. All the frustration, the longing, the fear, it all melted into that kiss. When we finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, and he whispered, "I don't know how to do this, but I know I want to try." My throat tightened. That's all I needed to hear. The night stretched on, but neither of us wanted to sleep. We talked in low voices, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd both kept hidden. He told me about the pressure he'd felt growing up, the way expectations had built a prison around him. I told him about my own journey, about shame, about loneliness, about finding the courage to stop apologizing for who I was. Every word brought us closer, until the fear that had seemed insurmountable hours before felt a little smaller. Still there, still looming, but not unbreakable. As dawn crept in through the curtains, Ryan leaned back against the couch, exhaustion lining his features, but there was a softness now, a peace I hadn't seen before. He looked at me and said, "You know what's crazy? For the first time in my life, I feel like I can breathe." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. That's what happens when you stop running from yourself. He chuckled, a sound that was equal parts relief and disbelief. I guess you're stuck with me now. Stuck? I teased. More like I finally found the one person worth holding on to. His eyes softened and he pulled me into his arms. It wasn't fiery or reckless, it was grounding, like finding home in someone else's heartbeat. But even in that moment of peace, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be questions, whispers, maybe even judgment. Ryan's friends, his family, the life he had built, they wouldn't all understand. Some might turn away. Some might try to pull him back into the version of himself they preferred. Yet as I sat there, wrapped in his embrace, I realized something. Love wasn't about guarantees. It was about the courage to step into the unknown together, no matter how rough the path might be. Ryan kissed my temple, his voice low but steady. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. And in that promise, I felt something shift inside me too. For so long, I'd been waiting for him to choose. To choose me, to choose himself, to choose us. And now, in the quiet of that early morning, he finally had. We weren't just two people caught in a complicated moment anymore. We were a beginning. A fragile, beautiful beginning carved out of fear and honesty and the kind of love that refuses to be silenced. As the first rays of sunlight painted the room in gold, I closed my eyes and let myself believe in us. For once, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Not when I knew that whatever it brought, Ryan would be by my side. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.